Hello there, and thanks for joining with me today. My name is Nick Wallace, and I work on the Professional and Education Services team at Turnitin, based out of our office in Melbourne, Australia. And today I'll be taking you through the Gradescope Getting Started with Gradescope for Remote Assessments webinar. Before we dive into the webinar today, if you have not yet signed up for an account with Gradescope, you can do so at the gradescope.com website. If your institution already has Gradescope and you're integrating with your learning management system, something like Canvas or Moodle, you will not need to create an account, and that process will already be done for you. If after the webinar you have any questions, please feel free to reach out to our help team, and their email address is help@gradescope.com. So Gradescope was a tool originally designed by some TAs at the University of California in Berkeley. And it was designed to help them speed up the grading process and focusing mostly on paper-based assessments. So they were delivering assessments in class and the students were doing a quiz under timed conditions. And then to mark those assessments, they would need to go through, they were setting up things like grading parties where all of the TAs would come together and grade, on a Saturday. And it was taking them, 9, 10, 12 hours to go through and grade all of these student assessments. And they really thought that, surely there must be a better way to do this. And that's kind of how Gradescope was developed. So part of the Gradescope or speeding up the grading in Gradescope is flipping the workflow of grading. So where we might grade on paper or a paper-based assessment is that we will grade all of student 1 first. So if there's 10 questions in our quiz, we would grade all of student 1's answers to question 1 to 10, and then we would move on to student number 2 and then go through and mark the answers for questions 1 to 10 for student 2, student 3, 4, so on and so forth. In Gradescope, we flip that idea a little bit. And we mark all of the answers that have been given by the students to question 1 first, and then move on to question 2, and then grade all of the answers given by all students for question 2. So there's a couple of different reasons why we do this. The first is that it can speed up the grading process. The second is that it helps to reduce bias and generally results in some more consistency when you're grading. So that's just something to be aware of when I go through and show you the grading workflow shortly. Gradescope works with a number of different types of assessments. So Gradescope was originally designed to facilitate marking for things like exams or quizzes that you might give in class. And then the students would give them back to you, and then you would go ahead and mark those. We also support things like homework, which is where students can submit instead, and they can be templated or variable length. And I'll explain a little bit about the difference between those two shortly. Online. So this is where a student would log into gradescope.com and complete the assessment online. Programming assignments, which is where students can upload code to Gradescope. And we also support bubble sheets, which is similar to a Scantron, if you've ever used those before. But this is where the student would shade in the corresponding bubble on a sheet for a multiple choice quiz. So up on the screen here is an example of an exam or quiz. So this is where we would give every student the same piece of paper or pieces of paper or the same quiz, and they would all write their answers on the same area on that quiz. These would then be given back to the teacher or the instructor, and then they can be uploaded in bulk and separated using the Gradescope artificial intelligence tools. And questions can either be graded manually or they can be graded using our AI assisted grouping, which is a feature that can really help speed up the time it saves to grade. The second here is the homework. So again, an example up there on the screen. But this is where you might just give the students a list of questions, or it could be, answer these questions from this chapter in the textbook. And they can either be templated or variable length, like we have up there on the screen, which is where a student would just write the answers to the questions on their own bits of paper. So it could be, for example, that one student, could write all of their answers on one piece of paper. Another student might take them 3, 4, or 5 pieces of paper to answer all of those questions. Online quiz. So this is where students would log into gradescope.com and complete the quiz online. And for these types of assessments, you have different types of answers that students can give. Some of them can be automatically graded, and you also have the ability to set time limits as well. Programming assignments. So students can submit code and they can be automatically graded using an auto grader that you've created. And you can also have manual grading components there as well, or a combination of both. And finally, we have the bubble sheet. So this is the one where I spoke about before, where you give the students a multiple choice quiz and they would answer, A, B, C, D, or E for each of the corresponding questions by shading in the bubble. And these are automatically graded, and you would set the correct answers for each of those questions when you're setting up the assignment. Perfect. So that is a quick intro to Gradescope. So what I'll do now is I'm going to jump out of my slide deck and we'll head to the Gradescope website. So the Gradescope website, easy to find, just gradescope.com. Here you can see at the top, you've got a sign up button here. So if you don't yet have an account and you're not connecting Gradescope with your learning management system, you can create your account just by clicking this sign up button here. Once you click sign up, it will scroll all the way down to the bottom there for you. And then you can click to sign up as an instructor. So once I click instructor, you just need to add in your first name, your last name, your email address, and then your school. And if your school's not already on that list, you can just add it in. And once you've done that, click sign up as an instructor. And after that, you'll shortly receive an email from us to say that your account has been created. But I've already got a Gradescope account. So what I'm going to do is just log into Gradescope here. And the first screen that you see when you log into Gradescope is your courses page. So this will have all of the courses that you've created. Of course, if this is the first time that you're logging in, you won't have any courses created there. But there are 2 courses in there by default, and they are Gradescope 101 and Gradescope 202. These courses are in there to help you kind of play with Gradescope, and so that you can kind of learn what the features are and play with all of the data in there without impacting any current student data or live student data that you might have from your institution. So all of the students in those courses are fake. So you can go into any of those courses and play around. When you go in there, you'll see that there's assignments in there that you can play with as well. But if this was my first time logging in and I wanted to get started, the first thing I would need to do is to create a course. Now, if you are accessing Gradescope through your institution's learning management system, this process will be slightly different for you. And you can access the information on how to do that from the Gradescope help guides, but it's a pretty automatic process. But if I need to create a course in Gradescope, this is how I can do that. So in the bottom right-hand corner, just click on Create Course. Give the course a name, a number first. So I'm going to call this GS101. Gradescope webinar. I can add a description to that course there if I want to. Select a term and a year for that course. And now these are US-based terms, so they don't exactly align to the names of the season we use in Asia Pacific, but just select whichever is most appropriate there. And then select your institution from the list. So this should choose for you automatically, but I'm just going to add this into Turnitin Melbourne. And then finally, if you are not integrating with a learning management system and you would like your students to enroll themselves into the course to Gradescope, rather than you adding them in, you can also allow them to do that by clicking on that check mark there. but I'm not going to do that today. And then I'm going to click on Create Course. So once I click on Create Course, that will take me to the dashboard for that course. So I'm just going to jump into another course that I've already created that's empty. So the next step I would need to do is to add students to my roster. So I can do that by clicking on Add Roster, or clicking the roster button here. And there are two different ways that you can add students. If you are integrating with a learning management system, you can automatically sync the students across from the class within your LMS. And it's a really easy process to do that. All I need to do is click on Sync Roster or Sync, you might say Moodle or Sakai. But you can either click the button there, or you can also click it down the bottom here as well. So once I click Sync Roster, just ensure that I've linked with the correct course, and then click Sync Roster. And that will bring across any of the students, the instructors, or the TAs that you might have in that course as well. When you're doing that, you also have the ability to notify the students that they've been added to that course in Gradescope. You can do that by leaving this box here checked. But if you don't want to notify your students that you've added them to the course in Gradescope, maybe you're not having them have any access to Gradescope and you're only using it just for marking exams or quizzes, and you're not giving them any feedback through Gradescope. You can uncheck that box there, and it won't let them know that they've been added to that course. But up to you there, which you would like to use. The second way you can add students to your roster in Gradescope is by uploading a list. And the way to do this is just by click Add Students or Staff in the bottom right-hand corner. You can either add in a single user, so one by one, so add in their name, their email address, and their role. And again, you've got email notifications there if you like. Or I can add students from a CSV file. So this is useful if you've got this information somewhere, maybe in a different learning management system or student management system that you might use. But there are 3 columns that are required: a first name, a last name, and an email address. When you're adding students, you can also add in their ID number if you like, and also a section number, or if you've split the students into different classes for that course, you can upload them to their respective sections. So I'm just going to go through and select the spreadsheet from my computer while we do that. And click Submit. So Gradescope will go through and attempt to match the columns in the spreadsheet to the columns that would come across into Gradescope. So here we can see that we've matched first name with first name column, last name is last name, email with email, and ID with the SID column in my spreadsheet. If you need to, for example, if it's got them backwards and you need to change them, you can just do that by clicking on the drop down there. Then select their role. So everyone that we're going to add in today is a student. And then we can also uncheck or check if we would like them to receive a notification. So then select import, and that will add in all of those students there for you. So we're done now setting up our course, and we've added students into the roster for this course. So naturally, the next progression would be to go through and to create an assignment. But before we do that, I'm going to show you the grading workflow within Gradescope. So I'm just going to, again, jump into a different tab, into a course that I've already got set up here. So on the left-hand side, I'm just going to click my assignments button there, and I'm going to go into the first assignment that we'll grade today. So click on exam quiz here that we've set up. And I'm going to grade a calculus question here first. So it's an integral question. And when I click on that question there, it will show me the first student's response to that question. So in the middle or on the left-hand side, you've got the student's response to that question, and we've zoomed into it for you. Over on the right-hand side here, you've got the dynamic rubric. So typically when we think of a rubric, we think of something that's like a matrix or a grid style that we might use to grade things like an essay. But this is what we call a dynamic rubric in Gradescope. And you'll hear me refer to the rubric quite a bit because that's where we do all of our grading for the questions. So as I mentioned, this is a calculus question. And the question is, what is the integral of x? For those who are not mathematicians, the answer for that question is a half x squared plus c. So we can see that the student here has got the question correct. And we can see the total points for this question is out of 3. So this, as I said, this student has the correct answer. So I'm going to click number 1 on my rubric there. This type of grading that we're doing for this question is a negative grading. So we're starting at maximum 3 points, and then we'll go through and we'll deduct a mistake or a mark or 2 marks for each mistake that a student might make. But this student hasn't made any mistakes, so we're going to select correct on our rubric here. So what I'll do now is I'll click next ungraded. And you can see down the bottom there is a next and there's a next ungraded. The reason why there is 2 different buttons is that Gradescope allows multiple people to be in there at the same time marking. So by clicking on next ungraded, it's going to take me to the next response to that question that has not yet been graded, just to make sure that there's no double up. So as I mentioned before, the correct answer to this question was a half x squared plus c. And we can see that this student is missing the half. So what I'll do here is I will add in a rubric item. And I'm going to say this student is missing, and we'll deduct 1 point for that. You can see in the comment there that you leave for that rubric item, you can use things like LaTeX notation. There's some markdown features such as bold, italics, and code. And you can also add in images to the rubric there as well. If you're not familiar with using LaTeX or markdown notation, this is useful for things like mathematics or scientific symbols and equations. And there is some more information in our help guides about using markdown and LaTeX notation. So as I mentioned, this student had a missing half at the start of their equation there. So we created a missing half rubric item and we've deducted 1 point for that. So I'm going to click next ungraded here. This student is correct. So I'm going to click 1 on my rubric there. But with Gradescope, and any of the buttons that you click to move between student submissions and the rubric items, they all have keyboard shortcuts. So instead of clicking 1 on my keyboard, on the mouse, sorry, I can click 1 on my keyboard there, and that will apply that corresponding rubric item. Any of the buttons down the bottom, you can use with keyboard shortcuts as well, and just hover over them and it will tag you the keyboard shortcut. So for this one, it's Z or Z. So this student here has made a different kind of mistake. So they are missing the plus C at the end of their equation there. So I'm going to add in another rubric item, call it missing C. And for that one, we're going to deduct 2 marks for that one. And then just click to apply that rubric item. With the student responses, you also have some other feedback tools to use to give them feedback. So you can click on the T over here at the top, and then just by clicking anywhere on the document, and you can type a comment. And you also have the ability to draw as well. So this is really useful if you've got a device like a Microsoft Surface that's got a pen that you can use to draw on the screen. I don't have one of those, so I'm using my trackpad on my laptop. But you can just annotate or draw. So we can say plus C there at the end. You also have the ability to give a specific adjustment to a student. So this is where you might want to add or subtract points just for this student's answer here, without this appearing as a rubric item. And you also have the ability to do that with comments as well. So you could say, we learned this. So go to our next student's response. So this student has made 2 kinds of mistakes. They are missing the half, and they are also missing the plus C at the end. So you can see by applying both those rubric items there, the student now only gets 0 points or no points for that answer. But I might think, oh, that's a little bit harsh to, give them 0 points. I might like to give them partial credit, at least for attempting the answer. So at any time throughout grading, you can adjust the point on a rubric. So I could say, for the missing plus C at the end, let's just deduct 1 point there. And you can see now that student would at least get 1 point. But in doing this, it also goes back, and for any student that has had that rubric item applied to them, the point will also, or the point adjustment will also apply to them. So for all those students that have had 2 points deducted there, it would now only have deducted 1 point for that missing constant or the missing plus C. So this is really useful. If you think about this, comparing this to paper grading, I'd need to go back, find through all of the submissions there, find those students that had answered that way, adjust their points and recalculate it. And it could be a very time-consuming process. So we'll go to our next ungraded student here. They've got a blank or incorrect answer. So we'll add in a rubric item, /incorrect. And we'll deduct 3 points for that one, so they don't get any marks. So I'll just go through and mark about five other students there. So this student was correct. So I'm just going to use my keyboard shortcuts here. This student is missing the constant. This student is missing the constant and the half. Student blank. There. And they are missing the half. So you can see in that time there, we've been able to go through and we've graded 13 students' responses. So grading through Gradescope this way, just simply having it electronic and grading it each answer for all of the students at the same time can really help to speed up that grading process there and really help with consistency with the grading. But now I'd like to show you another way that you can grade with Gradescope. And this is by using our artificial intelligence grouping feature. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to jump into another assignment here. And we're going to grade the same question, but we're going to use that grouping feature that I mentioned. And what this grouping feature does is that it will go through and any student that has given the same answer to the question, it will group those students together so that we only have to grade that group once. So if there's 5 students in that group, instead of grading each student individually, I can grade them all together. So what I'm going to do here is set the question type by clicking at the top. For this question, we want to form answer groups. And you've got a few different options. You can group blank answers only, which I'll show you an example of that shortly of where you might use that. Multiple choice marks, where students might have shaded in a bubble or ticked in a square or something like that. A math fill in the blank, which is useful when students are giving a small but kind of predefined answer area. Or you've got a text fill in the blank, which is useful for a handwritten word or two there. But this one, because it's a math question there, we'll use that math fill in the blank. So I'll click on save. And the Gradescope AI will now go through and group all of those answers together. So we can see that there's 5 students that have answered with a half x squared, 4 students that have answered x squared, 4 x squared plus c, 3 students that got the answer right, and then there's 2 students there that gave a blank answer. So after the Gradescope AI does its magic, you just need to go through and have a human element go in there and confirm all those groups are correct. So I can see that they're all correct there. So click confirm and review. If I need to remove any responses there, I can just click the response and it will take it out of that group. That group is correct. This group is correct. And that group there is correct as well. And that group is blank. And then we've got 2 answers at the end that Gradescope was not able to place in a group. So here, I can either choose to group some of those answers together, or I can add them into a group or just leave them by themselves. So this answer here that is a question mark is pretty much the same as a blank. So I'm just going to select it there and then click on the corresponding group. This one answer that says see extra page at end, I'm going to leave that out by itself and we'll grade that one manually. So now we'll select grade answers and continue grading. So now we've got my first group here. So we'll add in a rubric item for those students because they have the missing plus C, and we'll deduct 1 point, apply that item. This group here is missing the half. Again, deduct 1 point for that one. This group is missing the half and the plus C. This was the blank group. Deduct 3 points. The student said see extra page at end. So if the student's done something like this, I can click on all pages. I can see every page in their submission there. So let's just go to page number 3. And we can see their answer to question 1.1, half x squared plus c. So that was correct. And then we've got our last group of students here that was correct. So you can see in that time, we've been able to go through and we've been able to grade 20 students in probably about half the time it took us to grade 12 or so students that we did manually before. So because I've got a small number of students in this course, the time saving probably wasn't all that much. But if you think that if you can scale this up, 50 students, 500, up to 1,500, I think the biggest school we've got is a chemistry class in a school in California, and they have about 2,100 students in that course. So that's, the scale up with the number of students in your course or that are sitting that assessment, you can get a really big time saving. So the other type of AI-assisted grouping I'd like to show you is a question that we'll do that is a geography question. And this is where we have asked students to mark North Dakota and South Dakota on a map. So for this one, what I'm going to do is set the question type, select to answer groups. And because something like this is really difficult for the AI to pick up, we're going to group blank answers only. So any student that didn't provide an answer, it'll group them together. And then we'll manually go through and we'll create the groups. So select blank answers only, save. And now I'll go through and I will create some groups. So this student got the answer correct. So did this student, this student, this student, student. The student was partially correct, so I'm going to leave them by themselves. Correct, 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 and correct. Click on create group, and we can give the group a name if we want. So I'm just going to call this correct. Any students that were incorrect, let's just pop them in a group together as well. That student will pop in the incorrect group there as well. And this student was partially incorrect, but there's only one of them like that. So we'll leave them by themselves. Click grade answers. So for this type of grading, as I mentioned before, you can either do positive grading or negative grading. This one is positive grading. So I'm going to start at 0 points and add a point for North Dakota and a point for South Dakota. So let's add 1 point there and we'll call that one South. Let's go North first. Add in another rubric item. South Dakota. 1 point and apply that. Correct. So you can see in that time we've been able to go through and grade 10 students. So this was a group that was completely incorrect. So I'm going to apply that rubric item there. and the student was partially correct. So we'll select North Dakota because I got that correct. Next, ungraded. And we've been able to go through and we've been able to grade all of those student submissions for question number 2 there. So as I mentioned before, really big time saving there. You can save up to 80 to 90% of the time you've spent grading, simply just by grouping those answers there together. So that is the grading workflow within Gradescope. I won't go through and grade the rest of those questions, but I'm just going to jump into another quiz now to show you an example of what it would look like once we've finished grading. So once I've graded, we'll move over here to our review grades button on the left-hand side. And I can see all of the students there in that course. I can see the score that they've got, if their assignments yet fully been graded, and what time that was completed there as well. At the top, I've also got some basic information there about some statistics for the questions. Down the bottom, I can choose to publish grades, which would allow students to log into gradescope.com and see those grades there. So I can click publish there. And the students can see that. I can also send them an email if I want to as well, just to say that their grades have been published and graded. I can add in some more information there as well. If Gradescope is connected to my learning management system, I can post the grades back to the assignment in the learning management system or to the gradebook. Just by clicking post grades and clicking post. I can export the student submissions, so a copy of what they've submitted, including grading information, export the grading information for each student on the marked rubric into a spreadsheet, or I can also download grades there as well. So this will just give me the score each student got for the assessment. And then if I need to, I can input that information into a gradebook or another learning management system that's not connected. So I'll quickly show you what that looks like for a student when they see their grades in Gradescope. So I'm just going to jump into a course here. I can see that my exam here has been graded. I got 9 out of 13. I can then see a copy of my submission there. I can see what I got for each question. And then if I click on the question there, I can see which rubric items were applied to me there. So this is really useful to help students understand how their grade was calculated and why they got that score without them having to come and ask you, why did I get 2 out of 3 for that question there? Well, they can see as a teacher or as an instructor, I've deducted a point there because they were missing the constant. So I can get some really rich feedback there as well. If you've allowed it, students can also request a regrade. So they can do that by clicking request regrade, and they can say whatever you want. They want, I should. Question. Click on request a regrade. So that's how students can review that feedback there in Gradescope. Jumping back to my instructor view, I can see those regrade requests coming in by clicking on that button on the left-hand side. I can see that the student has asked for a regrade. I can click on review. I can see their question or why they're asking for a regrade, and I can give them a response back, or I can go through and change on the rubric there as well if I need to. So that's a regrade request there. You can turn them on and off just by clicking on the regrade request button on the left-hand side, and then you've got settings in the bottom right-hand corner there. So you can enable or disable them, and if they are enabled, you can add a start and finish date there too. You also have the ability as an instructor to see some advanced statistics there as well. So you can see for each question what the mean was. You've got some median, maximum, mean and standard deviation for the entire assessment. And then you can also see a breakdown for each question there as well. So we can see for the integral question there, the mean was 57%. But you also have the ability to click on the question and see some even more detailed information there. So we can see for that response, only 20% of students gave the correct response. 40% of the students were missing a half, 45 were missing the constant, and 15% got their answer completely wrong. So this is really useful information to use to kind of to dictate how you might approach teaching a subject in the future or a topic, or if you might revisit a content with students when you're teaching them. So you might do a review lesson on understanding derivatives. You also have the ability to tag questions as well. So this is useful to tag them. Maybe you taught it in lecture 1, and we taught, in lecture 1, we also taught a bit about United States geography. And then you're able to see if there's any common occurring themes there, for example. So if I click show tags here at the top, we can see for lecture 1, again, the mean was only 55% there. So the students didn't do all, probably as well as I hoped they might do. So I then might go through and, have a look at why that might be. In lecture 1, did I have a guest speaker? Maybe it was lecture 7, and that was the week that we transitioned to remote and online lesson delivery. So I might have had some issues with Zoom, with the audio. So yeah, you can use those labels to go through and see if there's any patterns occurring there. Alrighty, so that is the statistics there. So some really powerful information. But what we'll do now is we'll move on and we'll go through and we'll create an assignment. So to create an assignment, I'm just going to go into another course here. Again, to create an assignment is really easy. All you need to do is click the Create Assignment button in the bottom right-hand corner. It's then going to ask you which type of assignment you would like to create. And for the purpose of the demonstration today, I'll be showing you a homework or problem set assignment, which is really useful in online and remote learning. And I'll also show you the online assignment. But if you're after any information or guides on how to create any of the other assignment types, please just refer to our help guides. And there's some videos in there that will go through how to create those. But let's create a homework assignment now. So the first thing I'll need to do is give the assignment a name. So today, I'm just going to call this homework 1. I then need to select a template file. And this is just the list of questions that I might give to the student in PDF format. So let's select homework template. Next, I'll need to select who will be uploading the submissions. So either instructor or student. For this one, we'll select student. And this is most commonly what you'll use with this type of assessment. You'll need to select a release date. So this is the date and time at which students are able to go through and access the assignment and submit to the assignment. Due date, the date and time at which students must submit by. So I'm just going to set that to a week. And you can select a specific time there as well if you like. Do you want to allow late submissions? So this would allow any student that hasn't yet submitted before the due date to do so after. And you can set a late due date there as well. And then finally, you can enforce a time limit. So enforcing a time limit here would give students, say, for example, 90 minutes to complete this assignment. So once the student accesses it, a timer will count down. And then once that 90 minutes up, they can no longer submit there. For the purposes of this one, I'm not going to enforce a time limit, but if you do, check enforce time limit and then add in how many minutes they've got. Next, you've got the submission type. So either variable length, which is where you say you've given the student a template. Variable length is where one student might write 5 pages, one student might take 2 pages to do. Templated is where you've given the student, say, a template or like a worksheet to write on, and where the student would answer on that paper is kind of fixed. But for this one, we'll do a variable length. Group submissions, so you can allow students to submit in groups and set a group size. And you can also allow them to see the template. So you can toggle this on or off. I generally recommend that you do allow them to see the template. So click on Create Assignment. And next thing it will do is show me the template. And all we need to do now is just go through and create the outline. So all I need to do for that is just click on New Question here. So I can call this one, say, for example, question 1, or I might say chapter 1, exercise 3, however you would like to label the questions there. And then give it a point value there. So when we're grading, we know the kind of maximum points. So let's just say this one's worth 10 points. Question 2 is worth 10. And question 3 is worth 20 points. So click on Save Outline. And then that's your assignment creation process done for that homework type assignment. So naturally, what would happen next is that your student would go through and submit to that assignment. So again, I'm going to switch over to my student view and we'll jump into that course again. One there. We've got our homework question here. And as a student, I have the ability to submit in a few different ways. I can submit by taking an image or taking a photo and submitting an image. But there can be a lot of issues with students doing this. You get variation in image quality, size, shadows, background. This can sometimes make the image difficult to read. We recommend that students submit a PDF. And it's really easy for them to scan a PDF. They can do this with their phone. So there are 2 apps that we recommend they do this with. And so that is on the iPhone called Scannable, or on Android, there is an app called Genius Scan. And what they do with those apps is they take a photo of the assessment or each piece of paper. And what that app does is that it kind of uses some artificial intelligence to remove the background, get rid of any shadows, make the image quality really clear, to the point where it looks like it's been scanned through an actual scanner that might be connected to a computer. So there is some more information about that in the help guides about those apps there that we recommend that students use. So they can click on Submit PDF, click Select PDF and select it from their computer, and then click Upload PDF. So that's the first thing the student has to go through and do. The second thing that I have to now go through and do is select where on the pieces of paper they have answered the question. And it's a really simple process. All they have to do is select the question, and then on the submissions or each piece of paper that they've submitted, select where they've given that answer. So for example, I click on question 1, click that's on page 1. Question 2, I might have answered across page 1 and page 2. And then question number 3, I answered on page number 2 there as well. So a really quick and easy process for them to go through and do that. And then once they've done that, click Submit. And their submission has been successful. And that's all a student has to do to submit their work there. So we'll jump back to the instructor view. And I'm just going to refresh that page there. And I can see that the student has already submitted. Once all my other students have submitted there, I can go through and start grading if I want to. So I can click on Grade Submissions. Let's grade question 1. And then we can see it's showing us that page number 1 there of that student submission. And then I can see that they've got question 1, and then I can go through and build out my rubric as I had before. So that is the process of setting up a homework assignment, and as well as being able to go through and see the student submissions there. Perfect. So the next assignment we'll go through and set up is an online quiz. So again, I'm just going to jump back home into my course, to assignments, and then click create assignment here. So for this one, we'll select online assignment. Here, there is a beta label. You can ignore that. It's fully functioning and stable. But if you do have any feature suggestions or feedback or ideas, please reach out to help@gradescope.com with those ideas. So click on next. And just like my other type of assignment, I just need to pop in some details. The online release date and due date. Again, I can allow late submissions if I want to. Enforce a time limit. So this is very useful with those online quizzes. I'll set a time limit on this one, and then I can enable a group submission if I like. So click on create assignment. And now I just need to go through and build out my questions. So for this one, I'm just going to do a basic Australian kind of geography quiz. So the first one, I'm going to say, what is the capital of Australia? It's worth 1 point. And then in the box, I just need to add how my students are going to give the answer. So click on insert field, and this one is going to be a short answer. So this is where the student will just type the answer in the box, and the answer there is Canberra. And I put the correct answer in the brackets there. In this case, student must spell Canberra correctly. So answers like these are useful for 1, 2, maybe 3 word answers. They will automatically grade, but if you need to, you can go back and override the grading there. Question number 2. So for this one, let's do a free response. I'm going to say, describe the terrain of East Coast Australia. We'll say that one's worth 5 points. And then I'm going to insert my field again with free response. And because this is something longer and it's a free response, I don't need to define an answer there, and I will grade that manually later. Question 3. So for this one, we'll do a multiple choice. Which following not state? Victoria. And then I'll just add in another possible response, and we'll say Australia. And to mark the correct answer, I just need to place an X between the parentheses there. So if I wanted to, I could say Queensland was the correct answer, but we know California is not an Australian state. And another question. So for this one, we'll do a multiple choice. Which of the following cities? Sorry for that one. Won't do a multiple choice. We'll do a select all. So first one is Melbourne. Correct answer, Singapore. Correct answer, Perth. And then the last one, London. With the problem fields, you can also add in images there if you want to. So you could use this to, you say describe or what is the scientific name of this animal, or something like here you might choose to put in a map of Australia. And that would render into the question. And the last question here, we're going to do a file upload. So for this one, let's say draw a map of Australia. And here, what a student can do is they can draw a map of Australia however they like. So if they have a device that's got a pen or something on it, like a Surface laptop, they could draw it on a program on their computer, or they could draw it on paper as well. So what they can do is they can draw it on paper, take a photo of that image, and then they can either send it to their computer to upload, or they can also upload it from their phone as well. And what's really useful about the Gradescope quizzes is that a student could start it on their computer and then they could finish it on their phone if they needed to upload an image or something like that. So really powerful, and they can do that as long as it's within the time constraints that you've set. Perfect. So now that we've created our quiz, let's click Save Assignment. And what I'll do now is we'll have a look at the student view and we'll go through and we'll complete that quiz. So I'm going to swipe over again. And we'll have a look at our online quiz here. So I click Online Quiz. When I click on that, it tells me the information about the dates and the time permitted. So we can see we've got 90 minutes here and it's telling me when I should start by. So we'll click Start Assignment. So my first one, we know the answer to that is Australia. Second one, there are mountains. Which of the following is not Australian states? California. Which of the following are Australian cities? Melbourne and Perth, so I can just select those. And then I've got my file upload here. So I could, again, either, if this is something like draw a map, I could draw that on my computer if I wanted to, or I could take a photo on my phone and upload it. So I can click on Select Files. And for this one, I'm just going to upload something that's not a map, but is a submission. So the student's done that. They can see the file there. And now I can, as a student, I can click Submit View and Submission. At the top right-hand corner, I can see that the time has started counting down. So it will, tell the student how many minutes they've got left. If this is a little bit anxiety-provoking for the students, they can hide that there if they need to by clicking on the X or Show Timer to bring it back. And the questions also auto-save there as well. So the student doesn't need to go through and click Save for every question. So click on Submit View. And I can see my submission there. And then if it's within that time limit and I know that there's something in there that I need to go back through and fix, I can click Resubmit and go back through and make that change there. So that's how a student completes the online quiz. Again, very simple there. So we'll jump back to the instructor view here now. And we're going to click on Manage Submissions. And I can see that Nick student here, he's already submitted. If I click on Grade Submissions, I can see that some of the questions here have automatically graded. So this was the thing like, what is the capital of Australia, which was the word response, things like the multiple choice and the select all. But my East Coast terrain question hasn't auto-graded because we didn't define an answer for that one. So for that one, I can just click on that question there and I can go through and start grading. I'll see the student's response there. And just like every other type of assignment in Gradescope, I can go through and now build out my rubric there. So we'll jump back and we'll have a look at the Draw a Map of Australia. So I can click on that and it will show me the student submission of the file there that they've uploaded. So for example, if a student submits a PDF or an image, it'll render to you in the viewer there. So I'll be able to see what they uploaded. And we can see here, this is a map of America. So I might not give them points for that one. If the student submitted something like a Word document, generally they won't render. So you do have the ability to download and then you can open up into Microsoft Word. And things like, that's the same for things like PowerPoint, Excel, or any other kind of file submission that's not PDF or an image. But yeah, I could go through and start grading for whatever that student had submitted there as a file. Perfect. So that is our online quiz. So with that, that is the process of going through and creating assignments and grading assignments. So I'll finish up now and I'll have a quick talk about the help options that you've got. So to access the help guides in Gradescope, again, just click in the bottom left-hand corner. You've got access to the Getting Started guides. So these Getting Started guides are really useful. They're videos. So it's got a video of how to set up each type of assignment, how to grade, how to use the AI-assisted grading, best practice for scanning student submissions, etc. You've also got access to the help guides. So you can access them by clicking Account and then Help. Or you can also access these at help.gradescope.com. And this is searchable here. So you can search for any help articles there, things like resetting my password, how do I get started, etc. Or you can also reach out to our help team. So to reach out to our help team, you can click Contact in the top right-hand corner, or you can also email them, and their email address is help@gradescope.com. And they are really responsive. They've got a great help team there, and they'll be able to answer any questions that you've got, any suggestions, any feedback, or any workflow issues that you might be struggling with that you need some help with. Perfect. So that brings us to the end of this session today. So thank you all very much for joining. And remember, if you haven't created an account yet or used Gradescope, jump to the Gradescope website and get an account set up. But yeah, thank you for joining today, and enjoy the rest of your day.